You're listening to Listen Up Talk Radio. Todd Miller in conversation today with Michael H. Ballard, founder of the Resiliency for Life program for both adults and children. Michael and his team help people develop the skills to cope with everyday life challenges and adversities. And we all know that constant change can be both exhilarating and exhausting. And Michael's team help people learn how to thrive despite what's happening in day-to-day life. You've also been awarded the honorary title and rank of colonel.
Yes.
By the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We're talking Kentucky in the United States.
Yes. For
your volunteer work with the children and families with the United Way of Quinte.
Yes.
Quinte, Ontario.
Yes.
Interesting. How does that happen? How does one get recognized by a completely different sovereign nation?
Well,
it's cool, but it's...
Oh, absolutely. Well, it was a surprise to me because I certainly didn't apply for it, because some awards you can self-apply for. And if it helps your cause, God bless you, off you go for it. But in this case, it was like, I got these things in the mail, and it was like, the Kentucky Colonel, the governor of, really? And well, I've been doing volunteer work with Cancer Society, Children of Chernobyl. When the Kosovo refugees landed, I was the NGO coordinator, non-government organization coordinator. So I'd done a lot, but they zeroed in on that specifically because there was no formalized training for these kids that had been traumatized or abused or witnessed abuse. And one of the grandparents in the group politely put my feet to the coals and said, Michael Ballard, I'm 82. See that 2-year-old? See that 12-year-old? I need even one skill a month to teach them so they can have a better quality of life, because there'll be nobody around after I die. So she was very quiet, very respectful, but she did have her hand on my shoulder and with a big grin and said, besides, if you don't do it, I might come back and haunt you when I leave this earthly realm. So
a threat of the afterlife.
I'd had my own challenges with 2 bouts of cancer and a concussion and a brain tumor. My daughter had a brain tumor. I didn't. And some other stuff that was big. And so I knew what she meant, that we needed to have some skills and understand that there's a process to be more resilient. So I started looking at the research and I started working with these things. And the next thing you know, the Kentucky Colonels made me an honorary colonel. Which
Amazing.
I'm 1 part comfortable with and 2 parts uncomfortable with, because my friends and acquaintances in the military that are real colonels and higher, I somewhat feel like,
there's a little
am I worthy?
animosity?
Well, no. They're real happy for it. They know what I've been doing, but
did they ever ask if you've taken a bullet?
No. I already admitted that I duck well.
I just wanted to thank you for coming in today to shed a little light on your program, because I think it's a very useful program that we need to get the word out about. And we'll talk about your journey in a minute.
Sure.
I think I know what resiliency means, and I think if you say it to most people, they'll go, yeah, I know what it is.
Right.
But I want to know what your personal definition of resiliency is.
Well, mine's a little bit off the standard model. The standard model is resiliency is our ability to be plastique. They use the old Latin word malleable, flexible, and that's to a certain point part of my model, and bounce back. However, having faced dying due to cancer twice and emergency surgery at midnight once, I also define resiliency as their ability to increase the quality of our journey. So even if you're facing a life-threatening illness and could die in 6 days or 6 weeks, if you're resilient, you have a better quality journey. And so some people think that's awesome and wonderful, and a few get quite angry and say it's not possible. Well, I had my chronic illness, my 2 bouts of cancer, etc. So it works for me, and there's skills that can increase the quality. So that's me. It's a little wordy, but...
So... that sounds great. Why do we need it? What's the benefit for us? Why wouldn't the alternative of, as that old saying goes, packing up our tents and calling it a day work? Why doesn't that work?
Well, some of the people that need resiliency don't even know it exists. So one example is I work with a 5-year-old who'd witnessed domestic abuse and was still angry at the world because Daddy wasn't allowed to live at home anymore.
Right.
Daddy made some foolish mistakes and then was silly with his fists with Mommy. And I'm using these words gently because I don't want to trigger anybody's responses. And so he was angry at school. If he was a radio station back then, his tagline would have been all angry all the time. So every time the male teacher said something that was discipline in nature, he'd act up. So after 1.5 years of therapy, which was great to examine the whys and the how it happened, there was no skills offered in his therapy to help him cope. So what we did was we taught him some skills that gave him the ability to be more self-aware, and then his tipping point wasn't towards anger. His tipping point then with these skills was towards calmness and go, oh, it's my teacher asking these things, not anybody else.
Right.
So that made a big difference.
It was a trigger.
Yeah, so his teacher sounded like his daddy. And he was mad at his daddy, mad at his mommy. And so when the teacher would correct his behavior, because he's a very exuberant young man.
That's a good word.
And he had some anger in there. And I think that as a 5-year-old, he was allowed to be angry at these two adults that were supposed to protect him. They brought him into the world, and then suddenly the daddy decided to play and have a girlfriend without mommy's note and permission. So he had every right to be angry at the two of them for not making it right.
Right.
So that gave him the chance to learn how to be calm. And within 4 or 5 sessions, he was telling me that I've learned how to belly breathe, and I don't let it bother me anymore. So that was pretty cool.
That's
Experts
awesome.
would call it diaphragmatic breathing, but we tend to change the words so that 3-year-olds, one of my goals is 3 and 97-year-olds, and everyone in between should understand how to be resilient.
Yeah.
So we haven't lost the experts' words, and it's no disrespect to them, but belly breathing makes sense to 4-year-olds, and I can get 97-year-olds with light dementia to practice it, which helps reduce their agitation on occasion.
Cool.
And then there's the 17-year-old that wasn't doing well in school based on personality style and learning issues because, wow, everything in life's an adventure. Oh, that new kid over there, look at those shoes. I wonder where they bought them. Oh, I'm supposed to pay attention to the teacher? How do you do that? So,
what skill does that require?
well, the outcome we want is more focus.
Right.
However, getting to the focus, so we taught that person meditative walking, or one of my little boys last year in summer camp who has Tourette's, he said, you have to call this turtle walking or snail walking. So that helped her teach her brain and her body to go slowly. And then we taught her belly breathing, diaphragmatic breathing as well, and some other things. And so she passed.
Very cool.
She ever going to be a scholar? No. If you look at her IQ and her personality and that, she has a lot of gifts. Doing well in school, she doesn't have that skill set. She's a solid 60, but she's very happy to be 60 instead of 48.
So this is another topic entirely. Why don't schools teach these kind of skills to kids? I mean, we teach them things like the Pythagorean theorem that when you're standing in the middle of a Sobeys at 1 in the morning doesn't really help you figure out what's the better deal here. Do I buy the big box of Cheerios or the smaller box?
I wear my glasses so I can read the little labels and look at price per 100.
Exactly. But I don't want to get too far deep into this. But
No.
I mean, you're here for a reason. There's a reason that you're doing this. But I don't know why some of these things where you can't take what you do and build it into a school curriculum.
One of the challenges we have are these are skills that have been recognized in other cultures for 2,000 to 5,000 years. They've been relatively new to North America, and what I happen to be a WASP, so I have an English, UK, French, France heritage 400, 600 years ago. My culture didn't recognize them up until 1918, 1974, 1989 is when the 3 major skill sets were scientifically validated and published. And so in working with a large Canadian Board of Education, in 2010, they said, oh, Michael, we only learned about that last year in 2009 when it was published for us. And my response was, well, it was published for the whole world in 1989 from University of Chicago. The man's a best-selling author. He's got his doctorate. It was reviewed, peer-reviewed. It's brilliant.
There it is.
Other cultures have used it in athleticism, self-defense courses. This gets me in trouble and makes some people angry, but different faiths have used these things. They call it different things, but the end result is we can use it in the secular world for a lot of powerful things, for better outcomes. So they're just learning of it, even though it's 50 years later, because we have a lot of information silos and cultural barriers. Because heaven forbid, if they live in tents and stick homes, what could they know compared to us in North America?
We're far more
We have
advanced.
stainless steel and electricity. But they have better, to be blunt, software for the brain and the body.
I like to call this soft skills. They have soft skills.
And they're very powerful soft skills.
Yeah.
I got introduced to some of these things by a martial arts teacher who weighed a breathtaking 129 pounds. But when he practiced these inside the realm of the dojo, teaching self-defense to martial arts to teenagers, we had some very far-thinking, forward-thinking police officers taking the course. And they said, one of them in particular, I'm 220 pounds. I got golden gloves. I thought I was really good at self-defense. This man weighs almost 100 pounds less than me and frankly scares the daylights out of me because he has such great mind and body discipline.
Yeah.
And that's when I went at 14, mind and body discipline. Wow. I'm really good at music and I'm really lousy at math. I wanted to help me with my concentration. And I started doing better at math because the breathing skills, the relaxation skills. Of course, martial arts didn't teach them as such. They called it managing your energy.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why we talk about
your chi or whatever.
Managing our chi. Yes, we talk about managing our energy because it's something that I can get adult men to do. Can't get adult men to admit stress. Men just have beer. We gamble. We play rugged sports, but we don't have stress issues.
Speaking of managing that better, I find that there's a classic avoidance technique that a lot of the general public take advantage of. They have a misstep or they've taken 2 steps backwards, and they put their head in the sand and
Yes.
they hope that that storm or whatever it is they're facing goes away. Why is it that some people do that? And does your training or your program teach them how to address those challenges head on?
Right. Well, one of the things that we built into our one model is we talk about alternative states of living or being, and we all visit them. So it's normal in the hustle bustle of a day, a week, a month, or a year to have issues we avoid. It's normal. Who wants pain? Who wants to fess up that we screwed up, whether we're 3 or 93? However, those get in the way of a highly productive life and lots of comfort. Because once we face up to our mistakes and missteps, then we can get on with life. If we avoid them, my only quote that I believe is originally mine is, what we repress makes us regress. So if we avoid in time, it's going to bite us with interest and cause us more grief.
Yeah, the teeth get larger and sharper as time goes on.
Absolutely. So by helping people understand our model, we talk about when adversity strikes or something makes us uncomfortable, it's normal to take a sidestep and avoid. It also gives you time to reflect about, oh, what caused it? What did I do? What role did I play? So we talk about the 3 states that we visit that are normal, but are lousy to live in. Don't live, just visit. Minimize the visiting. So there's the state of being frozen. Something overwhelms you. Oh, you don't want to get out of bed the next day. Welcome to the world. You're very normal. But don't stay in bed 2 days in a row. It could get in the way of employment.
Hello, Brian Wilson.
Yep. Well, yeah, but there was some mental health issues there too. Yes. So, but yes, a trip to asking a friend to drive me to the therapist right now would have been a better option. But that's judgment on my part. So frozen, it's normal to visit, lousy to live. Then there's flicker. Well, I'm really glad to be here today, but I got a lot to do at home, and so I can't stay long, and we never really connect, and I don't make a lot of eye contact because I got both oars in the water, but somehow I'm only rowing with one. I'm going in big circles. Things getting accomplished, but a lot of repetition, not really getting it done. I have a friend whose relative cleans the house a lot, which once a month, top to bottom, back to front, awesome. Go do mine too. Yeah. But they sometimes clean the whole house every day and sanitize like they're going to have an operating theater in every room. So, again, flicker, it's okay to visit. Lousy to live. And then we talk about frenzy. Oh, boy. I wanted to come today, but I canceled at the last minute because maybe I'm having a panic attack, an anxiety attack. Maybe I'm just so overwhelmed with 37 things. Again, normal to have and visit. Lousy to live in. Who are you putting on your team, and what resources are you accessing to break the cycles, to move forward?
So it's frenzy, the Tasmanian devil, where it's swirling and swirling, swirling,
and not really going anywhere yet. So if flicker is going in circles, but we're getting things accomplished, just not productively, then frenzy is being very unproductive and getting almost nothing accomplished with a lot of physical, emotional, intellectual grief. And also, if we're in frozen, flicker, or frenzy, we have to watch ourselves because we want to manage our feelings. We want happiness. So then if you're an adult or even a youth or sometimes children, we look for supplemental or unique ways to divert our attention. So we do overly dangerous things. We look for a substance to help us mellow.
Coping strategies.
Coping strategies. And you know what? Again, not here to judge, just to reflect that having mentored an addict who went through a terrible family time at 13 to 15, ran away from home somewhere in between there. Coping strategies. He said, the new stepdad beating up mom, sister, and me. I only knew 2 at 13. Leave home, kill the new stepdad. Killed stepdad didn't seem to be good. So I just left home. Which was some wisdom, but not enough. And how sad he didn't know about when you're flickered and frenzied or frozen, yet you're supposed to call a friend you can trust that's discreet and go ask for help. So people need this because we don't talk about it. And I've worked with groups where there's 150 people in the room. They're all there because HR has them on probation due to inappropriate workplace behavior. And in the 90s, some of them, when we said stress, would get up and leave because I don't have that beep problem. You're here because I believe your file said you're drinking on the job. Well, you're here because you were using illegal substances and drinking and driving on the job. And so they respect you, but they don't like you, and you're breaking company rules and laws of the land, and you're putting them at risk and you at risk and the public at risk. So, yeah, you do have a problem.
Do you run into a lot of, well, we sort of touched on it there, do you run into a lot of denial or a lot of disassociation from responsibility where it's not my fault?
Yes, quite a bit. I've run into it with people with chronic illness where they go, well, I don't care if I practice these things and have less pain and less hospital trips. I just want it to go away. Well, I don't have a magic pill to make that happen, and neither does the medical community. But people who practice what I call resiliency, some call it stress hardiness, some call it mind-body skills. There's 30 or 40 different names for it. I like resiliency because I've been able to get 3-year-olds and 93-year-olds, male and female, and all faiths involved. I'm trying to be transparent. Excuse me. So by getting people to acknowledge it's a journey, that's what we talk about frozen, flicker, and frenzy, that it's normal to visit. If you don't visit there, like, teach me how you do that.
Yeah, how do we avoid that?
When I got my first diagnosis of cancer, I went immediately into flow, which is hard to do under pressure, but for some reason I knew if I did 24 hours of flow, all the big stuff to be doing. So I drove home from the hospital and went to the lawyer's office, got a new made will because I didn't have one updated since I was married. Off the checklist. Went to see the real estate guy who was in the same building, that happens often, and said, hey, here's my father's work and home number, my father-in-law's work and home number, here's my spouse's work number, and you have her home number. So I got big stuff going on. I might not be here in 6 months, might be dead, got cancer, it's serious stuff. But I trust you to do your best, and we love you and respect you. Poor guy went whiter than a sheet.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. He said, Michael, I didn't want to sell your house for 10 more years. I said, I know, but
be prepared.
My poor spouse is an overwhelm. We've only been married a little while, and we were going to be happy ever after till, I don't know, being realistic, 67, 77, 97, but not 27. So I got that done. And in 24 hours, I built a team of 190 people. Then I fell apart. Then I went into flicker, frenzy,
Once you knew you were
frozen.
safe.
Once I had big stuff, because I wanted my spouse to have the 3 biggest things done. The legal piece for the will, the real estate piece thing, and then I built a support team and said to some of them, check in on her once a week. And little did I know that by building a team for me, it was the wrong team for her.
I was going to say, your story, I mean, you seem to be a model of resiliency, and you've touched upon some of that in just what you've touched on. I remember seeing you on stage at an event in Toronto several months ago, and
Yes.
I recall you saying something about being in a hospital bed, and I'm paraphrasing, but you had an epiphany, you had some sort of visitation, you had something that happened to you there to move you forward.
Yes. Well, one of the things in our resiliency model we have is we talk about acceptance and mastery. So the acceptance that I had this disease, this illness, acute, it's serious, that I think I accepted it in half a second. And people say, well, how'd you do that? Well, it was reasonably easy. Both grandfathers had bowel cancer. One died of it, and one in the autopsy. It was there, but they figured it was going to take another 10 years.
Right.
That was the type I had. Luckily, I had slow growing, so there was time to catch it. And so I wasn't surprised. I just did it 40 plus years earlier than they did. So, you know, it's nice to be assertive in life, but there's some things I wish I wasn't so good at.
Yeah.
Growing tumors more than once now. So lying in bed, though, the other part of being resilient is, after the acceptance, is the mastery. Well, how do you be masterful and be resilient? I'm in the hospital bed. I'm not allowed to eat. Oh, I'm down 37 pounds 10 days after the surgery.
Wow.
And on chemo, and I'm sort of feeling like a newborn kitten. Maybe day 3 I can scratch back, but day 1, I just barely can move. So I started reflecting on key moments I'd stored away, but I'd never acted on. Mr. Sargentson, and behind his back, because he was old, I was 17 or 13, and he was at least 30. And you know how old 30-year-olds are when you're 13.
Yeah.
Well, behind his back, we called him Fast Eddie because he was probably within 8 ounces of the perfect body weight. And he could do all the things he asked us to do better than us and faster than us, which was like, wow, twice my age and that good. He taught me visualization skills, practicing things, seeing them in my movie theater between my ears in advance. I realized that I'd never done that. And maybe I should start practicing.
You learned it that long ago,
Yep.
and only put it into practice.
And there I am at 27 practicing what I learned at 13, 14. So I went, okay, there's one thing. That was visualization skills, the experts would call it. So I started practicing seeing me breathing easily, because with a big scar, incision healing, breathing hurt a lot.
I can imagine a lot of things hurt in that
they
area.
did. So then I remember my father when I was very young, 4 to 7 years old, and then after that, but specifically at 4 or 5, having a big epiphany, taking me for walks in the woods and even hikes. I've always had a lot of energy, so that gave my mom a break.
Get out in nature.
And we had great times. And he would say, now look at this tree and look at the bark where the moss is. What side of the tree do you think the wind hits? And so the moss grows on what side? The wind would dry or wet the tree. In the wind, it would wet it, but in the rain, it would wet it. But when it was dry out and sunny out, it would dry it. So the moss probably goes on the wet side where it doesn't get wind. If the tree has a lean in it, which side does the tree lean into? From or against? He didn't know it, but he was teaching me mindfulness. Paying attention to the small details, being in the moment. Don't judge, just watch. Just soak it up. So it was like, wow. That tied into practicing what I'd learned at 14 to 17 from my sensei master, Lauren, paying attention to my breathing. Because every time I breathe, it hurt. So then I wouldn't breathe much. Then I'd have a small mini panic attack because I wasn't breathing at all. It's really hard to live when you're trying to recover but not breathe. I didn't say I was the smartest. We'll blame it on the morphine. And so all of a sudden, some big things came together. My music teacher said, Michael, you have the gift of just being in the moment with your music. And that's not something every musician, every student musician has. Now, I was lucky. I had a protege as a teacher, so she was only within 6 months of my age. So at 16, I had this 16-year-old who was playing, for those that don't know conservatory, she was playing grade 10 conservatory, that's almost professional
very
level.
Difficult.
And there's a lot of bar players that can't ever play that difficult, technical. Doesn't mean that people that play at that level have the emotional skills to present, and they don't have great delivery skills, but they could technically play and knock your socks off. That's almost concert orchestra quality. So I only ever, in the end, played a lot of grade 6 and some grade 8. I had the opposite set of skills. I could deliver the performance. I just couldn't get the fingers to get all the notes. But she noticed that I could be in the moment with my music. We had a lot of fun with that. And so I started saying, what if I had music in my head and I gave my body and my mind over to it? And I didn't know it at the time, but I was practicing self-hypnosis.
So is this where resiliency entered your life? Or
this is where I unknowingly...
strains of it had been in your life?
I'd had it and didn't know I had it, so I started to compile and tried to use everything I knew.
So this is where you're qualifying it as an entity or a set of skills that people
to help me manage an unmanageable, untenable situation. Because 2 weeks into this, after surgery, they come to me and they have a meeting at bedside, and it was a teaching hospital. So the benefits of a teaching hospital is you have people that are 6 months close to getting their doctorates, and you have people that are years past having their doctorates, and now they're into specialties, and they're going around with your surgical team. So, as I joke, I must have some Scottish ancestry because I thought I was getting extra free opinions on top of my medical care. And the good news is we think we got it all, but the bad news is those 3 other tumors, one of them was stage 3. So obviously we can't take every cell of your body out and examine you. There'd be nothing left.
Right.
So that put added pressure that, not only did I have cancer stage 3, bordering on stage 4, it spread to 3 locations, and one of them was stage 3, and that's on a 1 to 4. 2 is scary, 3 is really frightening, and 4 is whoa. So I got a 3 and a 3 that's moving towards 4. So I knew I had to practice these things or I'd have no quality of life. So the music helped. I'm a big believer. In my 20s, I went from not liking poetry to suddenly finding out that the right poems at the right time were a great way to calm me down and recharge the well. So I would go to the men's shower room and tell the head nurse and my nurse that I'll be in the men's shower. I wasn't supposed to shower at that point. Too many open wounds, healing. I said, I'm not having a shower. I'll go in there, wash my face, wash my hands, and then I'm going to say a few poems real loud.
So if you hear yelling.
And now we find out that actually can change your T cell count, which are the cells that help keep you healthy because you're doing something positive, life-affirming. And I don't know what the research says about saying it out loud, but that means you're saying it while you read it.
You're declaring it, you're intentioning it.
You're hearing it.
Yep.
You're physically experiencing it, too, because I was doing short, powerful walks. Well, the best I could at 130-odd pounds instead of 170 pounds of me, 180 pounds. So it really was a time of every morning affirmations. And then I'd go do my walks around the ward. And then I wasn't allowed to eat, so I couldn't participate in breakfast because, you know, me and the IV pole was keeping me fed. Yeah. So I'd go back into the men's shower sometimes and have a good cry.
That's always helpful.
Well, my challenge was that I was so good eventually at affirming and self-hypnosis that for a couple of days I had no tears. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm scared out of my mind here.
I'm dehydrated and I can't cry.
Well, yeah, possibly dehydrated too. But no, I was so busy trying to stay balanced and focus on the positive that I might win, that I was forgetting to acknowledge that, yeah, it was scary. And that's one of the reasons why I came up with the term of I wanted to be a realistic optimist. I met lots of pessimists in the cancer wards and all my trips in. They're allowed that point of view, and I can't disagree. It's pretty damn frightening. Some of them were far sicker than me, and some of them, to misquote Monty Python's, but it's only a flesh wound. Exactly. It was a pimple on a dimple. Like, you know, it was 49 cells almost. As one guy said, the doctor said there were so few cells they counted it. I set a record in the OR, in and out in 7 minutes. Wow. They said, wow, this was one of my acquaintances, luckiest cancer patient they'd ever seen, if you can be lucky, because the tumor was that small. So
count the cells.
That's why you go and you get an endoscopy, a colonoscopy, an ostomy, an upper GI, because they can find things and they could make your life a lot easier.
So you're learning all these things, and obviously now you've taken it to the next level where you're showing other people how they can benefit from that. How do we put that to practice in our daily lives? And how do you work with people? Is it in person, online? How do you deliver this education?
Several ways. We do face-to-face and online coaching. So face-to-face is face-to-face, but then there's Skype or telephone.
Great.
Google Plus is beginning very popular because then we can do small groups with up to 10 people online. Seminars, workshops. It's all good. And then keynote speeches. So we did a video for a technology firm for 10,000 staff because they never gather anywhere.
Cool. Now, can anyone learn it? I mean, is it something that it requires any special education, special skills, prerequisite, or is this something that you can really, literally help anyone with?
Great question. The goal with our model was to make it simple that 3-year-olds could learn the basics. So I love a challenge. So an expert said, Michael, you can only teach resiliency to 7-year-olds and up. That's when they get the mental capabilities. And so to me, that was like waving a red flag or a red cape at me. Yeah. It was like, oh, thank you for that. Yeah. And I came back a couple years later and said, well, I have an advertising expert on my board of advisors, so we use what he calls creating memory tags or brain tattoos. So that's why we have a lot of alliteration. We have the frozen, flickered, and frenzied, but we teach kids how to be floppy, in flow, and delight in fight or fright and fun. Fright and fun is how we get entertained by our world. Whether it's the news with the driving bass line, whether it's the movie and the creepy, scary music, whether it's a video game with ping, ping, ping that affects our heart rate and gets our eye blink rate up. It's good to know about fright and fun because it's fun. Yeah. But I want kids to know it on purpose and by design that they're having fright and fun time. So if we can get 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds and 97-year-olds with slight dementia to do this, that's why we use the simple language. Because I can't teach a child belly or diaphragmatic breathing, but as soon as I say belly breathing,
they know what you're talking about.
Gently put your thumbs in your belly button because, you know, that's where the lint goes if you haven't washed between your toes and they're full.
So you're engaging them. You
engage them with playful, respectful things, and they learn. So it's any age.
And this is for individuals, but would this also work for families, couples, businesses?
We have worked with everybody. So we've done families and couples and communities in crisis.
Communities.
Yes. Well, you know, we had gunshots in Denzing Street, so I've worked with some of the families from there.
Right.
Just saddened that we don't seem to have a community process to know how to respond. Yeah. Because after a community issue like that, within 6 to 9 months, we see that there's fallout and burnout. Yeah. So people have left Denzing Street and left their neighborhood just to get away. But we know that geographic cures don't provide any solutions. The post-traumatic stress will linger.
Yeah.
But at least they've done what they can do. So families, communities, individuals, schools, businesses, sales teams, old age homes. It's kind of fun to be in a room full of 93-year-olds. It really is.
That one I'd like to ride shotgun on one of those
Well,
ones.
okay.
Yeah.
If we get another one, then you
cool.
can be the guest. You can be the co-guest.
My last question for you is, do you ever fall off the wagon? Do you forget your own teaching when it becomes stressful, or is it so ingrained now that it's like second nature for you?
Oh, fall off all the time. And so I have learned to laugh at myself because I've gone into frozen, flickered, or frenzied. The goal is to shorten the cycle and learn.
Yeah.
So stay safe.
That recovery period where
and
you
shorten the recovery period, but stay safe. So I had a very ill family member who was dying, so I went to see a mental health expert because, as I joked when I was there, I'm here for a checkup from the neck up.
Yeah. Cool.
And we had fun with it.
Awesome. Where do we get in touch with you if we want to work with you?
I'm at inquiry at michaelhballard.com.
Inquiry with an I.
An I, yes. And 416-229-4655.
Excellent. And your website is michaelhballard.com.
Perfect, yes.
Facebook.com/resiliency for life.
And or Michael H. Ballard as well on Facebook.
Great. Just before we leave, you said you used music, and,
Yes.
and we're big fans of music around here. What would a song that you'd like other people to hear that would help them be more resilient or offer?
It's very personal based on age and culture and beliefs, but one of my favorites was the Rocky theme from #1 because of the physicality of the song.
Yep.
He wasn't supposed to be good enough. And I talk about it, I get very emotional.
Yeah.
The running up and down the stairs. Remember, I'm 130 odd pounds. I'm not supposed to be strong enough to do anything, and I might not live in 6 months. The overextended sit-ups at the end of the edge of the boxing ring.
Yeah.
I have never done one, but in my brain, I have done that
Thousands
of
of
times because I got 70 odd medical clips in me now after the last surgery and tune-up. And so sit-ups hurt. So I only do a few for tune-up. I just don't believe in fitness anymore. I believe in just being in tone.
Tone, yeah. It's going to fly now, so we'll spin that as we're leaving. Todd Miller in conversation with Michael H. Ballard, Resiliency for Life. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.